Hi, Culturist. This video will help stop Obama's push to bring Syrian Muslims into our nation by looking at our culturist immigration history. Now, in regards to our history of discriminating between religious or cultural groups in American policy, Obama says, "That's shameful, that's not American, that's not who we are." Well, in fact, prior to 1965, we have always been a culturist nation. We've always known that we have a particular traditional majority culture, Protestants specifically, and a right as well as a duty to protect and promote it. Now let's look at that history. The Puritans were very discriminatory and very, very culturist. And there's a big misunderstanding here, right? People think that the Puritans came for religious freedom. Actually, they came here so that they would be free to be as strict and culturist as humanly possible. They allowed no non-Puritans into their areas and ostracized people who even minutely diverged from their dogma. Not racist, the Puritans were very, very, very culturist. And I'm not, for now, saying that this is right or wrong, but to say that we have always been against religious or cultural discrimination, that's just plain not true. Now, moving on. The Federalist Papers were essential in passing our Constitution, so they're essential in creating America. And the Federalist Papers partially based their argument for creating the United States on the basis that we were, quote-unquote, a people descended from the same ancestors, speaking the same language, professing the same religion, attached to the same principles of government, very similar in ours, manners and customs, end quote. And I'm not saying that the founders' views were right or wrong now, but this very strongly counters Obama's multicultural globalist idea that America is founded on a love of diversity and open borders. It counters this idea that being culturist, noting cultural diversity, is un-American. It's very American. And just after the Constitution was adopted, Congress's Immigration Act of 1790 limited naturalization to immigrants who were, quote-unquote, free white persons of good character. Question, is this racist or is this culturist? Right? It's definitely racist, but I would argue that the basis for it is culturist. The Federalist Papers, again, were written by the Founding Fathers, and they said having the same religion, values, and customs, all cultural factors, were the basis of the American Union. Their reasoning at this time was a little racist, but again, it was mostly culturist. Benjamin Franklin, for an example of a founding father, wanted to limit German immigration and disperse Germans. This was not due to their race, they were white. It was because he thought having enclaves of German language and German speakers would cause division and discord in our union. His was a culturist consideration. Franklin valued our unity, our solvency, more than our diversity. Next, I wish to look at the Chinese Immigration Act of 1882. Was it racist? Yeah, it was against Chinese people, but it was also culturist. The reasoning was culturist. The act was upheld by the Supreme Court in Ching versus the U.S. because the Chinese were, quote-unquote, residing apart by themselves and adhering to the customs and usages of their own country. That's a culturist consideration. And interestingly, the Supreme Court noted that diversity was the cause of a lot of Chinese white riots. And without noting whose fault the riots were, the Supreme Court argued that citizens' right to domestic peace and tranquility was more important than foreigners' desire to immigrate to the United States. Avoiding more rioting, the court held, was quote-unquote essential to the peace of the community on the Pacific coast and possibly to the preservation of civilization there. 2 decades later, the Immigration Act of 1903 made immigrants excludable on political grounds, on the grounds that they were anarchists. Literacy, ill health, and the likelihood to become public charges to go on welfare also were grounds for not allowing people to immigrate into the United States. This is the way that the federal laws were from 1903 all the way up to 1921 when we had the biggest federal immigration law ever. The 1921 Act, which was enforced by also the 1924 Johnson-Reed Immigration Act, was not racist. It was culturist, right? This law discriminated against people, said people could not come in if they're from Southern or Eastern Europe. That means if they were Catholics or if they were Jews. And again, this was not racist. This is discrimination against white people on a cultural basis. This is a culturist law. And culturism was so heavily ingrained in our American identity that FDR himself said that he would not allow Jewish immigrants into the United States during World War II. Right? And Ike Eisenhower, he had Operation Wetback in the 1950s, and under this operation, he kicked out over 1 million Mexicans. Now, again, I'm not saying that this is right or wrong, but this strongly goes against Obama's idea that America has always been defined by open borders and not discriminating, right? I mean, being culturist is very American. If Ike Eisenhower is not American, who is? Now, Obama would probably say that this was the old America, but history has taught us to have more and more tolerance, right? In the past, we were unenlightened, and now we're enlightened. We're multicultural. We're globalist. But this view assumes that the Puritans, the Founding Fathers, the Supreme Court, and even Ike were all idiots. That ignoring cultural diversity is a virtue. As a culturist, I say that our culturist history is the key to our having been safe, united, and strong. The Americans that came before us were smart to be culturist. It's part of who we are. It's part of our success. And multiculturalism's ignoring of cultural diversity and cultural dynamics is not intelligent, because cultural diversity is real. And to continue to succeed, we must embrace our cultural heritage. We must limit immigration and return to our tradition of culturist immigration, right? Pushing assimilation on immigrants. And on this theme, I would encourage culturists in other Western nations to investigate and take pride in your culturist heritage too. We must oppose this idea that the West has always been globalist and multicultural. We have a traditional majority culture, and we have a right and even a duty to protect it, to defend it, and to promote it. Okay, so lastly, to help with this argument against Obama and the left, the multiculturalists, the globalists, I want to point out an inconsistency in their argument. They tell you with one breath that our nation is defined by open borders and by not discriminating. Then, in the next breath, they tell you that ours has always been a racist, discriminating nation. The left's inconsistency here is a weakness that we can attack them with. And once we get them to say that our nation has always been racist, not multiculturalist, we can correct them. We can say, no, we've always been culturist. And then we can go on the offensive. We can ask them, is cultural diversity real? And if they say yes, we've got them. Because if cultural diversity is real, being culturist is smart. It's rational. So please use this tack, talk about our culturist history, and express pride in your Western nations having a proud culturist heritage. Thanks for watching.